Welcome back to the channel. This is the beginning of a new month, which means that it's time for another reading wrap up. This time for the month of March, which was not the best reading month for me. I only read 8 books, which is not a lot. It's not terrible, especially considering I read 2 really thick books, but still. I've been reading at least 10 books a month since like mid last year, and I wanted to keep the streak going, but it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, let's just get started. The first book that I read last month was actually a debut novel. It's called The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard. So this was a debut novel by an author I had never heard of before, and the concept is interesting. It's basically about these characters who live in a valley, which sounds normal, but then to their west and to their east there are also the same valley, the exact same valley, but 20 years in the future and 20 years in the past. So they can basically go to their past and to their future, which is a very, very interesting premise. It's what made me want to read it in the first place, even though I had never heard of the author. And yeah, like a lot of the book is interesting, but it's also obvious that it's a debut novel. I feel like the idea is interesting, but the actual execution is not as interesting. I still like it, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a bit of a missed potential considering how interesting the premise is. But yeah, I guess I still recommend it if you're looking for that kind of sci-fi, the kind that like it's the type of sci-fi that Kazuo Ishiguro would write, but just not as good, I guess. The second book that I read is another sci-fi, but this one is not a debut novel, and it's an epic. It's really thick. It's called The Deluge. The Deluge by, okay, how do I pronounce it? Deluge, yeah, by Stephen Markley. So I read this in audiobook actually, and it was a really long audiobook, like 40 hours or something. So it took a while to finish, but it was absolutely worth the read or the listen, I guess. It's an epic, like an actual epic with a lot of different characters, and it went through like a period of 20 years. It takes place entirely in United States, I think, but it still feels very epic because there are so many different characters, and at first they're not really all that connected, but then their stories start to connect. And yeah, I'm just like amazed by this novel. It's not perfect. I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5, but I loved it so much. And I usually don't like reading like books that long, especially from authors that I had never read from before. But this one, like the premise intrigued me and the characters intrigued me. And yeah, they are some really unlikable characters. The main characters, most of them are unlikable. Like they use a lot of slurs and they're just not good people, but they're really interesting. Like I think unlikable characters can be just as interesting as likable characters. So yeah, it was amazing. It's one of the best books I read this year, and if I'd read it last year, it would have been one of my top 10 like sci-fi fantasy books. And yeah, for anyone looking for climate fiction, this is definitely recommended. The next book I read was another audiobook. It's Kingfisher's The Hollow Places. So I've been reading a lot of Kingfisher. This one is very similar to another Kingfisher I read last month, which was what was it? The Twisted Ones, and it's also similar to another Kingfisher book I listened to last month, which was A House with Good Bones, which I read. I think it was the last book I read last month. No, the second to last books. So yeah, I read 2 Kingfisher books. They're quite similar. They're like rural fantasy horror type of stuff. It's like they're like cozy horror, but they're different, I guess. So if you're looking for cozy horror, they might work for you. I mean, I like them. They didn't really feel like stories that would be memorable, if that makes sense. I think I will forget about these stories, even though I like them when I read them. They're not the best Kingfisher stories I've read, but yeah, I still like her work, and including these 2 novels. Yeah, just not something that will stick to my mind for long, I guess. Then I read a couple of solar punk books. I've been trying to read a lot of solar punk. Uh, the last month I read two. The first one is by Emrys, Ruthanna Emrys. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's called A Half-Built Garden. It's basically alien invasion to a like post-apocalyptic kind of solar punk Earth where humans have kind of stopped destroying the planet, kind of. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people are annoyed by the way this novel like portrays gender, and it kind of feels a bit out of nowhere considering everything else. But I think it makes sense. Like the way the aliens like see gender are so different from the way we see gender. Similar to how like aliens see everything else differently from the way we do. And so I didn't have any problem with the way it like had discussions around gender. I actually kind of liked it, but yeah, I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5. I didn't love it because there was just some issues with the pacing, I think. But yeah, the characters are likable and the concept is likable, and I think solar punk is at this point it's still really early on in the genre. The only like great solar punk books that I've read were Becky Chambers' Monk and Robot books, which are some of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. There haven't been a lot of other solar punk books that are quite at that level. I think the genre is still beginning to get popular. So yeah, I think it's fine that there are a lot of like mediocre solar punk books, I guess. Um, the second solar punk book that I read last month is a bit better though, and that is Claire North's Notes from the Burning Age. So this one is also from like post-apocalyptic after the climate like catastrophe happened, and humans have managed or learned to live along with nature instead of just over nature, if that makes sense. But there are a group of people who are trying to get humans back to that capitalist era, and the main character is basically undercover trying to stop that from happening. And it's so good. Like, I think what makes this book so good is the fact that it's so simple. It's not epic. It's just from one point of view, and there is no like unnecessary stuff. The plot is simple. The characters are not like there are not a lot of characters, and they're all so memorable, and they work really well in their own roles. And yeah, I really liked it. I still like the Becky Chambers book better, but this one is a really good solar punk novel. Then I have two more books. The first one is also kind of long. It's another audiobook that is also like 24 hours or something. It's quite long. It's Seth Dickinson's Exordia. So this is from the author of The Traitor Baru Cormorant, which I really liked. This one I didn't like as much. It's very different. Uh, Traitor Baru Cormorant is like a very political fantasy. There's a lot of like political stuff, and while this is also political, this is a lot more. How do I say this? Baru Cormorant feels a lot more streamlined, while this feels a lot more epic. And there's a lot of like techno babble, like jargons, complicated stuff, and it's about this genocide survivor from Kurdistan who became like an American. I mean, who became a refugee in America, and then she basically meets an alien, and yeah, the alien said that you must help me in order to not let humanity die or something like that. And I really like the beginning of this, like the part that I mentioned there is really interesting, and it's kind of quirky. Like the connection between the main character and the alien is really weird, but like in a good way. But then the book just branches out away from that, and it just becomes way too convoluted, I think. It's like it reminds me of the three body problem. Like the characters are not really the focus, I guess. It's about the idea, and it's about science, and it's about alien invasion. So if you like the three body problem, then perhaps you might like this. I didn't like it all that much. It's really long and it's kind of just exhausting, even though the beginning is really good. So yeah, it is what it is. The last book I read is another debut novel. This one a lot better though. It's John Wiswell's Someone You Can Build a Nest In. So this is a romantasy, a sapphic romantasy. about a monster who falls in love with a human woman. And yeah, this was a delight from start to finish. I really like the main character and the like love interest. I really like both of them and there's like slow burn relationship. I really like the pacing. There are a lot of like tense sequences, but there are also a lot of scenes that are just cozy, and it really deepens the characters and their relationships and their struggles. And yeah, it's just really good, and it's definitely one of the best fantasy books I've read this year, and I definitely recommend it uh, if you're looking for romantasy, sapphic romantasy that's good and that has some horror elements, that has you know, I feel like this is just a lot better than romantasy, the average romantasy out there. But yeah, anyways, yeah. So I think this month I'm gonna read a lot of other thick books, which means that I'm not gonna be able to read a lot. I mean, right now I'm reading this, which is like 1,000 pages or a bit less, I guess. It's gonna take me like a week at least to finish. So yeah, I think it's gonna be worth it though. I mean, that book has like a 4.8 stars average on Goodreads. So yeah, and I'm really liking it so far. So it's gonna be worth it. But yeah, it's just that there's so many books that I want to read. So it's a bit of a bummer whenever I read like long books and it takes a while to finish. But it is what it is. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching and feel free to leave a like and subscribe as always. Bye.